The Stack. People, Business, Technology. With Dan Tomaszewski of Everything MSP.
Hello, everybody. Dan Tomaszewski here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another episode of The Stack, where we focus on people, business, and technology. Today, we are diving into an essential topic, building affordable and effective cybersecurity services for SMBs. With SMBs increasingly prioritizing cybersecurity, 83% planning to invest more this year, yet 76% lacking in-house security expertise. This is a massive growth opportunity for MSPs. Joining me today, we've got Mr. Liam Downward with Cyrisma, and he's an expert in helping MSPs design cybersecurity offerings that are both impactful and affordable. We're going to cover some educational topics for business owners, simplifying security operation, creating value-packed, profitable services. If you're ready to position your MSP for sustainable growth in the SMB market, this episode is for you. And with that being said, I've got Liam. How you doing today, buddy?
Hey, not too bad. Enjoying the lovely balmy weather that we have outside here in Rochester, New York, as always. Cold.
Yeah.
I always find it funny, and this is kind of like a joke I was mentioned to you before about saying if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. But what it also has is that it could be blue sky, no clouds out there, and you think it's lovely and sunny. You walk outside and your ears fall off because it's so cold. It gets me every single time, right? So that's Rochester, New York for you. Yep.
Yeah, and here in Michigan, it's ugly too, and and it is funny how we were joking earlier that we're excited that it's 21 degrees here, right?
Yeah,
And
how come the flip flops and the shorts?
Yeah. The last few days have just been brutal. With wind chills like 25 below zero, and one great thing is when you let the dogs out, they don't want to stay out there very long, so they come right back.
They don't. And I just tell you what was funny. I was in a meeting yesterday, and one of the guys that was on the meeting, and he goes, "If it's not golf season, I really don't pay attention to the weather."
Yeah.
And I was like, that's interesting. So you don't pay attention at all because it's golf. Right. It's not golf season. I'm like, okay, that's a new one for me today. That was so yeah.
I mean, when you got to crank the heat up in the house or turn the fireplace on, it's kind of hard to avoid it. But
exactly.
Hey, whatever works to get your mind off.
Yeah.
So cybersecurity obviously is so critical for every business, whether it be SMBs, mid-market, enterprise. But I think the opportunity for MSPs is that like the stats we were talking about, in my intro. SMBs want to continue to invest in security, but they don't have the internal talent. And that's where MSPs come into play, right?
Well, it is. And you think about it, the backbone of just in any economy is the SMB, right? Is that small to medium-sized business. Now, it depends on how you look at what you define as SMB. Is it revenue or is it personnel, right? I look at it from being personnel standpoint, right? Let's start off with that. When you look at anything 25 to 50 or above, you're in the SMB market space. But when they have a tendency where the CEO is also a doer, they can't work on inside the business to maintain that level of credibility around protecting assets. But what we have today is this that's not a new phenomenon, but it's now becoming an industry standard where if you want to gain a new vendor or a new customer, they have to go through security configurations and security standards to meet I can't do business with you because you don't have XYZ in place. Or if I want to do business with you, you need to have this in place. You need to meet a certain criteria. So this is where the MSPs need to look at and say, hey, this is where we look at it from an additional revenue standpoint. I can focus on the availability of systems, right? Bring them up, make sure that they're maintained. They're always online. They're always available for when the users at the company to do it. But when they start looking at confidentiality and integrity, they kind of look they get a little lost in the weeds because it's not within their realm of expertise. But if they look at it from a revenue standpoint, it's a land of opportunity. And it's not in the sense of, well, how do I, it's no longer race to the bottom, right? It's basically saying, how do I add on additional revenue? And this is what's happening right now in this phenomenon of the SMBs now having to look at cybersecurity as a part of their business umbrella. And this is where they look towards the MSPs to become their guiding light, their North Star, to help them to navigate those waters. And this is where education comes in, is taking that risk, being the entrepreneurs that they already are, and taking that leap of faith of investing in their staff already, or bringing people in that helps them to basically take it to the next level of providing those services to their
Yeah.
clients, whether they're new or existing.
Yeah, and one thing that you said as far as doing business with others, I think business to business are looking at that. On the consumer side, while we're not quite there yet, but I think in a perfect world, you let's say you walk up to a retailer and they've got a sticker on the door that is some kind of validation that they're secure, right?
Correct.
I think we're moving that direction because there is just way too many scenarios where there are incidences that based on maybe the lack of their efforts to put proper security in place, is going to keep people from doing business with them. And yeah, and again, in the perfect world, you walk up, you see that label, and you feel confident that it's secure and it's an organization that you want to do business with.
And it's because if you think back in the old days, old days could be last week for all we know, with all the how things change so quickly, right?
Yeah.
And we look at it, it's the sense of back in the day, it was kind of like, if I have a firewall and antivirus, I'm good. Okay.
Right.
That's the amount of investment. But because this ongoing battle, it's the path of least resistance, right? The bad actors are after data. Now, if they look at it, they know that the path of least resistance is through the SMB community. But they also know that those SMB communities have connections to bigger fish because of those agreements and contracts that are in place, right?
Correct.
That's why social engineering is the biggest thing that will never go away, right? Because they know that's the quickest way to walk past a firewall is through social engineering. It's no longer the little script kiddie with trying to hack behind firewalls. And back in the day when you see war games with Matthew Broderick's and hackers back in the day trying to, that's not what it's about today. It's about how do we walk past the firewall. And it's coming back by saying that cybersecurity for SMBs was a cost center, was never a profit center. Now they have to look at it as being a profit center, because if they don't have adequate security, they don't get award contracts. They don't get awarded opportunities and deals. And now it's becoming the understanding that, oh my goodness, I have to do this vendor risk management or vendor risk assessment that's asking me all these questions that I hadn't even thought about before. Now, we come back and we had this internal discussion. We were just talking about it this morning, and that is vendor risk management is a new thing for a lot of the SMBs, but they don't understand that. Dan, you could be a vendor of ours, right? And we go do an assessment on you, and it comes back and says a high risk. We have to then take that opportunity to say, hey, how do we don't do business with you and you lose a $2 million contract, or we put you into a bucket of such a tight realm of an agreement that forces you to go and spend $2 million of investment in cybersecurity. Now the SMB is going to go, oh my goodness, how do I do that? And that's where the MSP needs to come in and turn that negative into a positive, right? Because if I'm still awarded that agreement and I have to do this investment, the investment is I do it now. That means then when the next opportunity or new customer comes along that I have to do this vendor risk assessment come in play, all of a sudden I've learned, I've educated, and I've invested in my cybersecurity through the means of my MSP, that now I can go after more business, which means I become a leader in my market space. I get that more of a brand awareness around cybersecurity, and it's that sticker on the door, right? That you go into the
Yeah.
retail store. Hey, I am PCI certified. I keep your data protected. All these things that you expect these retailers to have, you're going to have that within the realm of the that organization, because the MSP is going to say, hey, SOC 2 compliance, ISO compliance, all this other stuff. But you'll see this thing popping up every so often. It's called CIS controls, right? Level
Right.
1, level 2, level 3. That is the foundation that the MSPs can invest in to help their clients and become those subject matter experts that they're looking for. And they ask you to do that. We get asked a lot, Dan. I know I'm kind of talking about what I mean. We get asked, because we're in cybersecurity, we get a lot of MSPs that ask us and says, well, how do I add additional revenue to myself? Right? How do I take a product set or a service and generate net new revenue? So we come back and tell them that there's multiple ways of doing it. You can go out and do an assessment, right, and charge them $5,000. But if you turn that into a managed service, you can waive that $5,000. Now you turn that into recurring revenue. But what about existing customers? Okay, but if you're doing XYZ, you're already charging them $100 per desktop, right, or server per month for services. You can bill them $5 additional for whatever you're doing. Or if you're offering them virtual CISO services, add an additional $75 on there. And if you have a customer that is 100 endpoints, you just now increased another $7,500 a month of services. To the MSP, that's huge. It's even better for the actual SMB, because now they don't have to go out and hire. Because now you've just basically saved them money by paying you. They don't have to pay additional taxes, additional benefits, that you're actually saving them money in the long run, and you become that trusted partner, not a vendor, because you ultimately want to become that trust, and you actually ingrain yourself in those organizations because you're listening to them and actually providing the services that you need. And SMBs are always going to be attacked no matter what. But if you're there to protect them, you're reducing that risk. You can never eliminate it. It's not about a matter of how, it's a matter of when. And you want to take that when to be as further out as possible as you possibly can.
Yeah.
But that continual improvement by actually absorbing and understanding cybersecurity, not from the simple standpoint of antivirus and a firewall. It goes above and beyond that.
Yeah, and that mitigation is so critical. The conversation for MSPs to their prospects and clients has to be around what worked yesterday isn't necessarily what works today. And that, we just as, the bad actors are becoming more sophisticated and up in their game every single day, we as MSPs protecting our clients, we need to up our game as well. And those are the conversations we need to have with our clients and prospects, because, they might be like, well, why are you adding this and adding this? You're always adding these things. And it's, we're adding these to help you become more secure. Yes, we might be adding some things, in our stack that's going to help you be more efficient, more productive, more profitable, maybe deliver a better client experience. But it's the security component of it, which is going to continuously be changing. And, we have to have that discussion with them. And these are the discussions that we need to be having today compared to our old discussions, about going over, hey, these are how many tickets that we helped you with this, past quarter. They don't care about that, right?
No, they don't.
And you're not going to get a business leader, the decision maker, engaged in a conversation if you're talking about historical data. If you're talking about, number one, business outcome, but also keeping them secure and protecting their business, because, that you mentioned them maybe losing a $2 million contract. Well, if they don't make the investment, they might lose everything. So, it might be, you might lose one contract, but over the long term, you could lose the entire business. And, and we see this in the news on the enterprise side. Unfortunately, we don't see it, for SMBs, and, because it's just, there's number one, there's way too many of these scenarios, these incidents happening every single day. But also small businesses, unfortunately, don't get that, media attention that they should be getting.
Correct.
But it doesn't mean it's not happening. And,
It's not media sensationalism, right? It's media sensationalism. Like Facebook just got hacked into, and 1.5 million records got stolen. Where you could have an SMB organization that lost 5,000 records, but not knowing that that was just an entry point into a larger organization, just to kind of have you focused over here. And this is where, and I was going to bring this up, and that is a lot of the MSPs are afraid to take that leap of faith. And the reason why they're afraid to take that leap of faith is because they have this kind of ingrained in them that if they show their client that they are an F, they're going to be looked upon as being, you guys didn't do an adequate job. Guys, it's not about that. It's about saying, turn that negative into a positive. Let's look at it from a standpoint. If you invest in a bunch of tools and it comes back and says your grade is an F, digest that information and show the customer by saying, hey, our SLA says that we are providing you adequate services in these key areas. In actuality, we don't have any Windows vulnerabilities, right, per se, within our environment, because the SLA says we're patching Windows, we're doing all the stuff, we're on the latest firmware, on the network switches, everything. Our third party is what's killing us and generating an F. That's why we invested in these tools. In that, we can bring that to your attention, that you're using third-party tools that makes it harder for us to keep you at a higher level of security posture. What can we do? Okay, let's sit down. Operational, business, and technology. We need to have a conversation, bring in those in alignment, because sometimes they're all in misalignment and they're not brought together. So they can show that you're guiding them in a path of increasing their security posture instead of coming in and doing this. But then you got CISA on the back end by saying, hey, we're going to allow the SMB to sue you guys as an MSP if we do get compromised and find that out, that you are not providing us adequate services. Right? You can go and do a quick search. So you constantly have this battle against you by saying, hey, as an MSP, do I want to do it? Or do I want to focus on what I do best? And that's availability. I should be doing other areas because it's now becoming part of the business. You're going to get asked those questions. I say to people, forget about all the noise. Forget about the potential of being sued, because if you're doing an adequate and doing an excellent job in protecting that customer, you can show that in every step of the way while you are building trust with that customer. So we get asked, what can we do to protect the customer? Obviously, yes, next gen firewall. You look at EDR, you look at BDR, all these acronyms, right, that come out to play, right, in the situation. But also get back to basics. Best cyber hygiene is understanding where the data is housed for the customer. Okay, is it in the cloud? Is it on-prem? The reason why that is, you've got these buzzwords called zero trust. You can't implement zero trust if you don't know where your data is. The next step is those systems that house that data, are they vulnerable? Okay, whether that is third party, whether that is Windows, whatever operating system, and are we patching it? And are we securely configuring it based on CIS benchmarks, which a lot of regulations reference now as the de facto for system hardening? Just doing those simple things is providing a higher level of security for that customer without really trying to reinvent yourselves, because you're taking technology and utilizing it. The next step of that is virtual CISO services, taking those things and turning it into remediation steps, helping them design policies and procedures, education, awareness. So you're constantly engaging with the client and hiding their awareness. People says, well, we got QBRs and all these reports. Build a platform that allows the customer to log in at any given time. How many times have you had a CEO at 2:00 in the morning and going, why am I paying this MSP all this money? What are they showing me? I get a QBR report, which, a lot of MSPs still do because they think that's a value, but that just gets put to the wayside. Once they leave their office, they forgot about it. But you need to show continual engagement in doing that. And a lot of times there's a fear factor behind the MSPs to kind of step forward and do that. The ones that do it, they excel. They take that leap of faith, and they are actually able to keep customers for a lot longer than they ever thought they would be able to, because of that fear of another MSP coming in and doing prospecting and saying, oh, you guys are bad. because you weren't doing this, this, and this, but you build that trust. It's going to be hard for somebody to take that business away from you. And then the best mode of marketing is word of mouth. And SMBs are very big in communicating and talking to other people in their industry about who they're using for cybersecurity and who they're using for technology and IT.
Yeah. So those services that you just mentioned that MSPs can implement will help them protect their SMB customers. But the question I have for you is, what should they keep in mind when choosing tools and platforms to build some type of cybersecurity program for their clients?
And this comes down to it. A lot of times they pick it up based on price, right? Oh, I'm going to pick the cheapest solution because it's checkbox. Forget about the checkbox. Forget about the price. You got to think about it from a productivity standpoint, okay?
Right.
Because the old added age of when I bring a tool in, oh, I got to hire a new person, okay? You may be a small MSP with employees of 10 where the CEO is also a doer, right? They're not sitting back and strategic looking how to grow the business, but they're also a doer. What you need to look at is how do I effectively provide productivity to my staff to still perform their availability tasks, their tickets and everything else, but also engage in cybersecurity. So you need to look at things that are accessible, i.e. multi-tenant, right? It has to be affordable in the sense that it doesn't hurt our margin. If we consolidate tools down, we still open up margin and still leave a lot of room for growth of revenue generation. But then simplicity, which is that productivity. How do I make it easier for my engineer to get access to the information, identify a risk, and mitigate it in a timely manner, and not to go 50 miles into different clicks and not have complexity? Because cybersecurity itself can become overly complex and become very expensive. That's why cybersecurity itself, if you look at the market space, can be very saturated with a lot of tools. But a lot of tools are designed for enterprise, not designed for the MSP and multi-tenants. So you have to find the needle in the stack of needles, but at the same time, work and build, but also build a relationship with the company that you can add in your comments and your requests that get built into the platform. Because then at the end of the day, your voice is heard, but it also enhances your productivity, which means your margins go up, not down. Because that's the key thing, is generating revenue and maintaining a revenue and increasing that and doing that when looking at a solution. But it's all about tool consolidation and simplicity, accessibility, and affordability.
And the interesting thing is, you take a look at that criteria that, an MSP is looking at for a vendor to add to their stack. We got to be thinking about the same way as far as, a SMB customer looking at an MSP. Because, they're not just looking for someone to, fix a printer. That's something we do, but those are the basics that, we should be able to do in our sleep. And, those shouldn't even be taken into consideration. The things that, that are critical are how are you going to protect me? And what are the things that you're doing? And what are the things, that you're doing to ensure that you're not being complacent and that you're staying on top of the latest and greatest things that are going to, help keep you secure. But another question I have for you is in the area of selling cybersecurity to your existing customers, those especially that are using, just basic IT services, but don't use anything that's more advanced from like security solutions. What is your recommendation how to approach those that, are focused on, again, those clients that say, hey, I need you to fix my printer. I need you to make sure that if an end user has this issue, but they're not thinking about the security side. How do we approach that?
Well, it's trying to get past the mentality of, I call it cyber poverty line, right? Because they say they have no money until a breach has actually happened, and then they become the cyber rich, which means I don't know how that happens, but it does, right? In reality, right?
Yeah.
But the way I go into it is to state this, and this happened for me when I was a consultant before starting Cyrisma, and that is getting organizations to think outside of their normal thought process, which is we need to build on revenue. Okay. We are manufacturing. We don't have any compliance standards that we have to adhere to. This is where education comes in. It's about the MSP having a wider view of industries, right? And what I mean by that is, okay, let's take manufacturing. They're in a situation where they could have technology that could be 10 or 15 years old, right? Which inherently may be no longer supported by the manufacturer or the vendor, but it
Yep.
still leaves open for vulnerabilities. But then you go back and say, okay, yeah, you may not be, if you're not publicly traded, you're not SOX, or you're not this, you're not that, but you are have to be ISO for other areas around quality. Then you bring in the state law in. Oh, by the way, but you are in New York. You do have information on customers. You have employees that you have. Therefore, you are bound by New York State breach. I'll just say Breach Notification Act, which means that any information that you house on a New York State resident has to be protected, which means then you need to go through these steps to protect it. We're here to help you to do that, because if you are compromised, you have to then engage with the attorney general to go through that process, and you can potentially be fined. Now, if we go through that, it gets them to think, oh my goodness, you are right. I do need to invest in cybersecurity. I'm not going to be behind the scenes. Now, manufacturing, again, they're working with aerospace because they could be making aircraft parts. Now, they have to go through a vendor risk management. It means that, oh my goodness, I could lose this contract, right? So it goes back that they need to look at how it impacts their line of revenue. The other element of it is understanding the value of the data that you have, right? What would that double-edged sword value be? If I have sensitive data that's determined to be sensitive to me, what's the value of that to the company if it was ever compromised or hacked or stolen or through ransomware? But what if it's sensitive data that's sold, that can also be sold in the dark web? What's the value of that? And that starts opening up their eyes to start realizing that, oh my goodness, I have $1 million worth of sensitive data sitting on my network that I didn't even know really existed. That means that I am at a higher point, because if I lose that $1 million, I have no way of gaining back my company again. I have to close the doors, because these are the things that you do. It's not about, in the past days, you used to have FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You got to bring realism into it. And realism is basically showing them and saying, hey, let's go and do a simplified data scan just to kind of get them the idea. We just found $80,000 worth of sensitive data on 4 laptops in your HR department. What is that data? Social security numbers. It's on a laptop that leaves. Now you got starting to think about them. Well, what would happen if those laptops got stolen? Let's have a war room session. Let's have a tabletop session. What would happen if they got hit with ransomware? How would we cope as a company? Because all of a sudden, there's now $1 million or $2 million worth of ransomware that they're asking us to pay. We can't afford that because we only have $500,000 of ready available cash in our bank. Right. And now all these things, you start bringing realism, gets them to think. But what it does, it actually makes you the expert that they're like, that's why we picked you. That's why we're investing in you as our MSP to help us to navigate these murky, but also rapid waters that things can change from one day to the next. Right. And that's why we're doing this.
And of course, this is complete sarcasm, but I mean, if we educate our end users, don't put, PII here and there, they should just listen to us, right?
No, you'd think, right? You'd think.
Right.
We are natural hoarders, right?
Yes.
We are natural hoarders. We find the path of least resistance, right? I'll give you an example, right? We're working with, this goes back many, many, many years ago, working with a organization that says, and we're talking to the CIO. The CIO goes, we have no problem of where our data is. We know it's all in the cloud, all in the cloud. But he says, I'll go and run this test, and I want to know what you found. Okay, within 24 hours, we found 1.5 million social security numbers outside of their cloud, sitting on 20 laptops. Okay.
Wow.
Now, this gets better. So the CIO goes, oh my goodness, this is an absolute joke. This should not be happening. They thought I had corrected it. Goes back to the person and says, you need to clean this up. We got brought back in as part of the assessment to come in and redo it again. We found the same 1.5 million social security numbers. They took the Excel spreadsheet and converted it into a Access database, thinking that they would get away with it. Humans find the ways of doing it. That's why continual education is great, But education has to be backed up with technology to identify the catch-all scenario so you can continuously educate. But it also comes down to consequences and accountability. So that's why the MSP has, unfortunately, the element of finding information that has to hold people accountable. And that is even the SMB has to be held accountable for their own staff, because if they institute a security program, it has to be adhered to. But it has to be a situation where the MSP is strong enough to say that no matter what position you are, you have to be held accountable, because sometimes it has to come from the top down. It can't be driven from the bottom up, because then you have this stare effect if it's driven from the bottom up. Oh, I'm a manager, but everybody below me should have tighter security than I do, right? And then that creates, dissent in the ranks, because they feel that, well, why are they getting away with stuff and we're not, and we're held accountable? And then the sanctions that happen don't always become mandatory, they become discretionary. And that's why that guiding star, or that person that's holding that light, which is the MSP, helps the organization to navigate those type of scenarios and put a nail in to stabilize the process of cybersecurity. And that's why it's a very, very, very unique opportunity for MSPs, because it's kind of like they've already got a company, right, as the MSP, but their entrepreneurial spirit shouldn't stop there. Let's now take that leap of faith and invest in cybersecurity, because we know that we can take that next step in our evolution as an MSP. Whether you decide to become an MSSP, that's strictly up to you, but you're already moving in that direction already, because you're engaging stuff without realizing it and getting paid for it as well.
And, and at the end of the day, if there's an incident and you're face to face with that business owner, or you're, maybe sitting in court, having to defend, yourself, the answer of, well, we told them not to do this, is not going to fly, because like you said, you need to back it up with technology. And, so this kind of leads into, the last question I have for you is, how does Cyrisma enable MSPs to build security service offerings for the SMB market?
But it builds it because it allows them to not only handle a tactical, right, which is talking about data, vulnerability, to secure configuration, dark web, right, because you want to find out if the data is already exposed on the dark web, accounts and so forth. But then also bringing in the strategic element, right, engaging in action plans of how to enhance their security by policies and procedures, as well as GRC, right, governance, risk, and compliance, and bringing in a level of strategic element to their toolkit, right, but all within that single interface that rolls up to an overall risk that they can have their client log in 24/7 and see that data in real time. But it also shows credibility, because it puts the accountability on both sides. The MSP to follow through on what they're doing by showing grades increasing and performing well, risks going down. The SMB also engaging and maintaining that level and not allowing it to creep up, right? Because we always want to circumvent, right? And that's how we identify these issues. So Cyrisma is one of those tools that allows to consolidate, so they can save from an ROI perspective and a TCO, but also generate additional net new margin and or revenue.
So as we wrap up, as far as any MSPs that want to give you guys a try, of course, they can reach out to cyrisma.com. I do have your URL scrolling on the banner there.
Yep.
Of course, any MSPs that are, visiting everythingmsp.com, you can search for Cyrisma, and, you can connect with them directly there as well. We have some links to be able to connect to you. But do you have any special offers or demos available for?
So we one of the things that we have is that they can go ahead and take a full trial of our platform and use it as a customer, because we tell people do it as a customer, because that'll help you to go out and do an assessment. If you got an assessment coming up for a customer, Go use Cyrisma, and then you can turn that into a managed service with your first customer that can literally cover the cost of Cyrisma, right? So take advantage of that. We do have special pricing as well, where we do that when you engage with us. We work with you to kind of come up with a bespoke kind of pricing that helps to work with you, ramp up. There's many different things that we can do to help you to be successful. We're not sticklers in the sense of here's the pricing and this is what it is. We want to work with you to become successful. One of the key things that we're going to be doing this year in 2025 is to start building out ways of actually teaching and educating MSPs and how to sell cybersecurity to become more effective in their market space. So they become leaders, right? Because that's what they want to do is they want to build and become leaders, and how to do that successfully without breaking the bank, because that's what it's all about, because security can be expensive.
And, I like what you said as far as using that to for your own MSP, because I mean, number one, to use the good old phrase of you got to eat your own dog food.
Correct.
But if your organization isn't secure, why would your clients trust you securing their organizations?
Correct.
So
correct. And I go back. There is actually a few we've been told to where some of the MSPs have lost business because their SMB became a little bit more aware and says, hey, we want to do a vendor risk assessment on you. Right. And the MSP basically failed, and they literally canceled the contract. So again, it does mean that you have to walk in your own shoes to prove to the MSP, again, that you are doing what you deliver, and you actually are working. Because sometimes you've heard it, a cobbler does great for this, but their own shoes are all got holes in it, right? It's the same thing with construction worker. Construction worker builds a beautiful house, goes to his house that's falling apart, right? I'm not saying that's the case, but it's always these kind of metaphors that people use to kind of get the point across. And we want to make sure that the MSPs are eating their own dog food, walking their own shoes, protecting their own data for their own constituents, but also the information that they house on their customers as well is protected. And that makes it easier in engagement with their partners and clients.
Perception is reality.
Correct.
So, all right, Liam, I want to thank you so much for your time. For everybody out in our audience listening to us, thank you so much as well. Until next time, we will talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you, Liam.
Appreciate it, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to The Stack.